Let's go ahead and get started. So hi, everybody. Thanks for being here. My name is Grace Rennie, and I am the grant making and administrative specialist for Arts New Orleans. And we are here today to talk about the Louisiana Project Grants program for this coming fiscal year 2026. So just off the bat, the deadline is June 27th at 5 p.m. The application closes at 5 p.m. So make sure that that's in your calendar if you do plan on applying. Okay, so about the Louisiana Project Grants program. So this program is administered by the Louisiana Division of the Arts. It oversees the Louisiana Project Grants program in collaboration with 9 regional arts councils that then re-grant those funds within their region. So Arts New Orleans serves as the regional arts council for what is called Region 1, which includes Orleans, Jefferson, and Plaquemines Parishes. The LPG program provides a system for funding arts projects across the state by giving artists, nonprofit organizations, public and private schools, school boards, colleges and universities, and local government agencies in each region the opportunity to develop arts projects that meet their local needs. And the purpose of the program is to cultivate innovative arts projects across the state that have a lasting impact within each region. So there's several recognized artistic disciplines that are all defined in the grant guidelines. So those are dance, design, folklife, literature, media, music, theater, visual arts, and crafts. And then new this year, it's the LDOA's Year of Food. So they have added culinary arts this year. So I'll go into how they're defining that in just a minute. But so in general, the eligibility to apply is that you have to apply in the region you're domiciled in. So everybody across the state applies through the same system, and then you'll be assigned to the appropriate region. And applicants can apply for up to 2 projects per application cycle. In addition to that, a nonprofit can also serve as a fiscal sponsor for 2 additional projects for other entities. So again, we are in Region 1. These are the 9 regions as defined by the Louisiana Division of the Arts. So again, it's Orleans, Jefferson, and Plaquemines Parish that I would be the contact for your application if you're in those parishes. And the grant amounts are also defined by region. So the grant amount for Region 1 is between $2,500 and $5,000. So you can make a request anywhere in that range. And I have on here again the deadline, which is June 27th at 5 p.m. So the goals of the program are to encourage professional artists and also organizations to undertake projects that make an impact on or meet a local community need, utilizing the arts in each region of the state. And then it's to increase access for the arts for all who reside in the region, to showcase each region's artistry, creativity, and ability for innovation within project development, and to leverage additional local and national support for the arts in Louisiana. So here's the timeline. So the application opened on May 5th, a week and some change ago. The applications are due June 27th at 5 p.m. And then in July and August, we'll convene grant review panels who read all the applications and make funding recommendations. And then if you are funded or not, you will receive notification in early September about the status of your grant award, whether or not you've been recommended for funding. And then if you have been recommended for funding, you will receive a contract to complete by October 1st, and the grant activity period begins October 1st. So it's a fairly quick turnaround. And that grant activity period that your project has to fall within is October 1st of this year through September 30th of next year. So make sure that whatever you're proposing, the dates of it fall within that period. Otherwise, it's not eligible for the grant. So during that time span, you will do your activities, and then a final report is due a month following the end of that time period. So by the end of October in 2026, you'll need to report out on your activities. So eligibility. So this is a state grant. It's state funded. There's a lot of ticky little details here. So I'm going to go over all of them and I'll check in for questions a few times throughout this. So again, Region 1 applicants have to be domiciled in Orleans, Plaquemines, or Jefferson parishes, and the activities that you're proposing also have to take place in Orleans, Plaquemines, or Jefferson parishes. I've read this list of who's available, or who's eligible, but I'll go into some details. So for nonprofits, you can apply Louisiana nonprofit tax exempt organizations that are registered with the Louisiana Secretary of State or that have 501(c)(3) status with the IRS are eligible. All nonprofit organizations have to be in good standing with the Louisiana Secretary of State and the Louisiana Legislative Auditor at the time of application. So go on the Louisiana Secretary of State website, make sure you've submitted your annual report and that you're listed as being in good standing with the Secretary of State. Sort of a subset under nonprofits, chapter organizations are eligible. That would be using their federal group tax exempt status of the central organization if the chapter organization is domiciled in Region 1. So if you are a chapter organization of a national group that is headquartered here, that you have your chapter headquartered here, you are eligible. You'll need to submit the IRS information about the central organization and a letter of support from the central organization. Governmental agencies, so local, parish, and state governmental agencies such as libraries or municipalities are eligible and don't have to submit proof of nonprofit status. Public and private schools, as well as school boards, are eligible, and each school is considered a separate entity. Colleges and universities sponsoring activities intended for community participation.
I'm on a call. That's okay.
Can everybody mute, please? Thanks. So colleges and universities that are conducting activities intended for community participation. So not academic, credit producing, or curriculum oriented activities are eligible. So those activities need to provide significant access and the probability of significant attendance by the general public. And each university department is considered a separate entity. So if you don't fall under one of those areas that I just discussed, you can apply still by using a fiscal agent. So organizations and entities who lack the legal status to be an applicant, as well as individual artists, can apply by using an eligible 501(c)(3) nonprofit organization as a fiscal agent. So this is important. Individual artist projects must directly benefit the community and include community participation. So I hear from a lot of artists that see Louisiana Project Grants and want to try to apply just as an individual artist for their personal practice. It's really a grant that's intended for community-based projects. So the involvement of community and the benefit to community really needs to be a core component of your work in order for it to be a fit for an individual artist. And then the fiscal agent assumes legal and financial responsibility for the project, and I'll go into that a little bit more. So one thing that all applicants have to have is a UEI number. So this is a number from the federal government that serves as a unique entity identifier for every organization that receives any kind of federal funds. These are not direct federal funds, but the Louisiana Division of the Arts receives a large portion of their budget from the NEA, and those funds are continuing. So everyone that applies needs to have a unique entity identifier. If you don't have that already, do it as soon as possible. It's normally a smooth process, but every once in a while, they'll need additional documentation that will hold that up. And you apply for a UEI at sam.gov, sam.gov. There's several third-party organizations that will offer to do it for you and charge you a fee. Don't do that. It's free. Just go directly to sam.gov to get your UEI. Great. So are there any questions right now just about eligibility? you can just come off mute if you have anything. Great.
I actually have a question. Okay. And it's probably an important one. So we are a org that is based in Kansas City, and we're bringing our annual conference to New Orleans for 3 years. So Claire Vey over at NOTCF, she recommended this grant to us, but it doesn't seem like we're eligible.
Yeah, no, everyone that receives this grant has to be domiciled in Orleans, Jefferson, or Plaquemines Parish. So if you're working with a local partner as a part of that, they might be able to apply for something related to it. But if you're not domiciled here, you're not eligible.
Okay, so yes, we would have to find a fiscal org.
No, you couldn't apply with a fiscal org. You still have to be located here even to use a fiscal agent. So I'll talk about that a little bit more now. But no, you as your organization based outside the state could not apply for the Louisiana state funds.
Got it. All right. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
Question. I have a question as well. This is Archer Abraham. I was wondering concerning what about chambers? If you're part of a local chamber that is here, that is a nonprofit, but I was trying to figure out as for what we fall under those stipulations.
Would that be like a chapter organization? Like you're an affiliate?
No, we're more of an affiliate, but we have our own standalone 501c3.
Okay, if you're a 501c3 that's domiciled in Orleans, Jefferson, or Plaquemines Parish, then you're eligible.
Okay, thank you so much.
Yeah.
And a question. I'm part of the New Orleans Community Print Shop, and we're going to apply under the fiscal sponsorship of Antenna. Do we need our own UEI as well, or will we fall under Antenna's UEI?
You would put in Antenna's UEI when you're filling out your application.
Cool. Thank you so much.
No problem.
And I have a question about eligibility. If it was a collaboration, I was going to do a composition and was hoping to collaborate with people outside of town as well as people in town. I'm here and I live in New Orleans and I'd be sort of the go-to person for the grant. But can payment for the grant go to people outside the state if we're collaborating on Zoom, for example, to compose this thing?
Yes, you can have grant costs that are, with collaborators that are not in Orleans Parish. When we get to the or Orleans within Region 1.
Gotcha. Okay.
When we get to the scoring criteria, there is sort of a preference towards local artists that's built into the scoring criteria. So that's how that would be taken into consideration. So we'll talk about that a little more. Great. Thanks. All great questions, really helpful.
Yep. I also have a question. Hi. So we received an LPG grant last year and with Rick Rack, and we were wondering if we're eligible to apply again this year, if we can do it 2 years in a row.
Yep. As long as y'all, submit as long as you're in good standing in terms of your current grant, you can reapply for the next year, which you are. So
wonderful. Thank you.
Great.
One other quick question. I'm Becca with Prescription Joy. If we're trying to decide between 2 separate projects, is there a person we can contact to ask which project they would be more likely? Oh, you. Okay, perfect. Great. I'll email you about that then.
No problem at all, Becca. Thanks. Great. So I'm going to keep going. I'll open up again for questions in a little bit. So fiscal agents. So this is, more of what I was just talking about in terms of eligibility. So just defining a few terms around fiscal agents. So a fiscal agent is a nonprofit organization acting on behalf of a sub-applicant. So the sub-applicant is the person with the project. And the fiscal agent assumes responsibility for the legal and fiscal management of the funds granted for use by the sub-applicant. So the sub-applicant is the artist or organization that lacks legal status that wants to do a project and contracts with a fiscal agent in order to be eligible for the grant. So the fiscal agent agrees to submit and sign the grant application on the sub-applicant's behalf and to receive the funds for the grant and then pass them on to the sub-applicant. So they are legally and financially responsible for all of the grant funds, the fiscal agent. So groups and individuals applying with a fiscal agent have to have a written agreement outlining the terms of the sub-applicant fiscal agent relationship. So who's going to track grant expenses and performance indicators and, you know, prepare all the information for the final report, outlining all of those sorts of things. So you just have to have a written agreement that'll be uploaded as a part of the application. Fiscal agents have to comply with generally accepted accounting principles, which all organizations that are funded do. The accounting system should clearly separate the grant funds from other revenues, and records should identify them as funds to be used for the sub-applicant's activities. Documentation of grant expenses should be accounted for by the fiscal agent. And the fiscal, again, this is in here a bunch of times, the fiscal agent assumes legal and financial responsibility for the project. Organizations can serve as a fiscal agent for up to 2 other applicants in addition to their own applications. And this is important. So fiscal agents have to be domiciled in the same region as the sub-applicant, and the project has to take place in the same region. So the sub-applicant, the fiscal agent, and the activities all have to be within Orleans, Plaquemines, or Jefferson parishes. It could be like the project can happen in Jefferson Parish and the fiscal agent can be in Orleans Parish, but it all has to be within Region 1. So fiscal agents can also not serve as a provider of services within the same project. So you can't, if you're working with someone with an organization as a fiscal agent, you can't hire them to be the documentarian on your project as well, or you know, any other thing that you would be paying someone to do on the project. It can't be the fiscal agent that you're paying, and the fiscal agent's fee cannot exceed $150. Okay. And all of these details are in the grant guidelines as well if you need to reference them. So a few very specific ineligible applicants. So organizations receiving line item support from the state legislature, those organizations are ineligible to receive grants for arts programming related to those line items. Is one. Regional arts councils, so we at Arts New Orleans are not eligible to be an applicant or a paid provider of services on a grant. Past grant recipients who are not in compliance with Arts New Orleans, the Louisiana Project Grants program, or the Louisiana Division of the Arts are not eligible. Any organization that is not in good standing with the Secretary of State or the Louisiana Legislative Auditor, and you can check your status. There's links in the guidelines to go and check that you're listed as in good standing with both of those entities. And then anybody who doesn't have a UEI. So those are who is not eligible. So back to the recognized artistic disciplines. So all projects that you're applying with have to focus on one or more of the recognized artistic disciplines. So those are dance, design, folklife, literature, media, music, theater, visual arts and crafts, and culinary arts. There's definitions for each of those within the grant guidelines. And the one that is new this year is culinary arts. So I wanted to go ahead and share how the LDOA is defining culinary arts in terms of this program. So culinary arts is the art and science of preparing, cooking, and presenting food. It involves creativity, technical skills, and knowledge of ingredients. For the purpose of the LPG program, culinary arts projects must reflect and engage the community where the project will take place. They may include recipes or techniques that are culturally relevant. Culinary projects can be enhanced by the services of professionals or trained culinary specialists, but they don't have to be. Culinary arts projects are evaluated for their cultural significance and ability to engage participants and their community through the history, story, sensations, and emotions represented and elicited by the project. Culinary arts projects do not include providing refreshments or a meal intended to accompany another activity or gathering. So it needs to be the focus. It can't just be, you know, in addendum to something else that's happening. So there is a whole list of ineligible expenses for this grant. I have 3 slides with 16 little squares of all the ineligible expenses. So I'm not going to go over all of them. I'll highlight a few, but please make sure to go and reference that list in the grant guidelines when you're putting together your project budget, because it will come up sometimes. And you just want to make sure that everything that you're proposing to be paid with grant funds can be paid with the grant funds. So operating costs that are not directly associated with the project, you can't fund. Activities and expenses that occur or are incurred outside of the grant period are not eligible to be paid. Another one that comes up fairly often, so activities that are generally not available to the public or only serve an organization's membership are not eligible. Fundraising. So let me see. There's a whole bunch of these. So food or beverage is also not eligible unless it's a culinary arts project. So that's one that tends to come up fairly often. Fees to children under the age of 18. Cash prizes or awards are not eligible. Lobbying expenses and licensing fees of any kind are also not eligible. So those are most of the ones that come up often, but please make sure to go review this list. It's in the guidelines to make sure that you're fitting within them. Okay, so that's all of the eligibility stuff at this point. So the panel process. So after you submit your application, we convene review panels that are comprised of community members. I'm still putting together those panels now. So if there is anyone that you think would be a great panelist, please let me know. There's a form on our website. Or you can reach out to me directly. So review panels are composed of community members who are selected to reflect the region's ethnic, demographic, and geographic diversity, in addition to having the artistic and administrative expertise needed for application review. We receive a large number of applications in our region, and we are very much not able to fund all of them. It's a fairly competitive grant. I think last year we received around 80 applications and we're able to fund about 30. So that's something to know. So in order to accommodate that volume, we split the applications into 4 panel groups based on artistic discipline. Policies are in place to avoid conflicts of interest for panelists, and they review them online and then meet to discuss and finalize those funding recommendations. So that's how decisions are made. They're by your peers from the local community.
Quick question, Laura.
Yeah.
Thank you. I wanted to quickly ask if you wanted to serve as a panelist for a different region, is that okay?
It goes region by region.
Yes, I would think so.
Some regions will use panelists from outside their region. We don't do that because we have such a dearth of wonderful people in our local community that are capable of serving. We just don't need to go outside the region. But I know some regions have been open to that. I don't know which ones exactly, but you could reach out in the grant guidelines. It lists all the coordinators for all the regions, so you could reach out to them and see if they're looking for panelists.
Gotcha. And then also wanted to ask for the culinary eligibility. I know it mentioned concerning, I think, recipe and I guess the preservation in that regard. Would it be eligible for artists, for culinary artists concerning those wanting to be taught concerning business in culinary arts? For those kind of managing their business and things of that matter, or would that be something that be possibly eligible?
So it needs to really focus on the sort of art side of culinary arts and not the business side. So it's more about, continuing legacies of food and perpetuation, but not necessarily business development. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
Great. So these now the grant evaluation criteria and bonus points. So these are the criteria that grants are judged on by the panelists, and the LDOA has changed it up a little bit this year. They've made some of what were just criteria in the past into bonus priorities where you can receive additional points for making sure that you address those priorities. So consider those when you're writing your application and make sure that you're hitting on those bonus priorities in order to be as competitive as possible. So artistic merit and need and impact are weighted most in the process. So artistic merit includes the expertise of artists involved as providers of services. the degree of artistry and the innovation involved in the project. And then the bonus priority here is the incorporation of local artists and art forms, to go back to that question from earlier. So not to say that you can't include artists from other places, but it is a bonus priority to be supporting local artists through these projects. So need and impact is weighted the same as artistic merit. So that includes efforts to engage local populations reflective of the community and engagement of new populations previously unserved by the organizations involved. Efforts to address a community need and gain community involvement, and implications of the project beyond the funding period. So the bonus priority in this criteria is demonstrating collaboration and partnerships across the region. So, working with other organizations across our region on the project you're proposing. Next, weighted at 20% is planning and design. So that's the involvement of the target audience in the planning process, the ability to track performance indicators and account for what may be learned from the project, as well as quantitative outcomes, the inclusion of project evaluation methods, and then the bonus priority here is having a clearly thought out accessibility plan for the proposed project activities. And then finally, weighted at 10% is administration and budget, so that the request level and use of grant funds are appropriate to the project, and the clarity and completeness of financial information. So making sure that you have all those details straight. You'll fill out, as a part of the application, a budget template as well as provider of services forms that outline all the individuals and entities that will be involved in your project and how much you're paying each. So making sure that those provider of services forms line up with your budget is a great thing to be thinking about here. Okay, so I'll get through the rest of this and then we'll just open it up for questions. So this is in the guidelines as well, just some things to think about in planning your proposal. So before you start, consider really whether this is the appropriate funding source for your project. Does it align with the priorities and the scoring criteria and the intent of the Louisiana Project Grants program? It's a fairly involved application. So if your project isn't a good fit, we don't want you to spend a ton of time writing this application for it to not get funded. And if you have any questions about whether or not your project would be appropriate, you can definitely reach out to me and I can help you think that through. So think about the needs of your community. How is your project going to have a meaningful impact or meet a particular need? Involve the community in the planning of your project and think about who will benefit from it. What are the anticipated outcomes? How will you track those outcomes? And what space are you leaving for learning? Think about how your project will be accessible and creating that accessibility plan for everyone, including your targeted audience. And then be realistic and specific in your plans. Make sure that you're talking and in conversation with everyone you're talking about including in your project to make sure that it's fitting into what they need as well. Assess realistically the costs, personnel needs, and time requirements for your project, and plan for ways to revise the project but still accomplish it if you receive less than your funding request, which will happen sometimes. So think about how you can scale it if you apply for $5,000 but only receive $4,000. Talk to me if you have any questions. Refer to the grant guidelines often, and then start early. Don't leave this to the week before the deadline. There's a lot of details involved, and being rushed in this process is not going to come out with a strong proposal. Okay. So the application process, like I said, everybody applies through Submittable. It's an online system that's pretty user-friendly. You'll go to this link, cultural development, stateoflouisiana.submittable.com, and you'll come to this screen. The Office of Cultural Development, which the Division of the Arts is under, has several open grant opportunities. So make sure that you click on the Louisiana Project Grants button to make sure you're filling out the correct application. So you have to make a Submittable account. So make sure that you keep track of that information, because if you are funded, all of your grant documents and grant communication is going to happen through Submittable. So you'll be in and out of this system all year while the grant is in process. Okay, so application assistance. So I'm gonna do 2 Zoom drop-in sessions. So I'll just be in a Zoom room like this and you can show up and ask any question you have. So these are the dates for those, May 27th from noon to 1 and June 12th from 4 to 5. And you can register much in the same way you did for this info session on our website. And then if you're unable to make it to one of those, or you want one-on-one support at a different time, if you want me to review what you've put together and give you feedback, I am happy to do that. Just reach out to me. My email is grace@artsneworleans.org, and my cell number is here and also all over the grant making part of our website. If you do want me to review anything extensively for you, the cutoff for that is 2 weeks before the deadline, just so I have enough time to really give the attention to it. If you reach out to me, 3 days before the deadline, I'm not going to have the time to be able to look over your materials. So if you want me to review an application or meet with you for a while to go over things, please ask for that support by June 13th. Okay, so what happens if awarded? So award letters are sent via submittable. So make sure you have that information saved. And then grant payments happen in 2 parts. So if you're awarded, you'll submit your contract and you will receive via direct deposit. We'll get your bank information from you, 75% of your award. So that is sent to you upon contract execution. You'll go through the entire grant period. You need to spend the entire grant amount. And then you will submit your final report and receive that last 25% basically as a reimbursement. So keep that in mind when you're planning your grant activities and cash flow, that you're not going to have that 25% of the grant until everything is done and has already been paid. So just keep that in mind. If the scope of your grant changes, as long as it's still in the spirit of the original application, it's normally fine, but you do need to update me. You also need to let us know about your events so that we can attend them, which is one of the best parts of my job. And you'll need to include the official logos of Arts New Orleans and the Office of Cultural Development / Division of the Arts on publicity materials for your activities. And so marketing materials that show that, as well as financial documentation for all grant expenses, are a part of the final reporting. So you'll need to submit receipts, invoices, check copies that correspond to all of the expenses that you're submitting under the grant. So those are things to be aware of in terms of what it'll look like to manage this grant. Okay, so that is the end of all of my talking at you. Here is my contact information. It's also all over the website. And that deadline, just one last time, is June 27th at 5 p.m. So I see there's a couple questions, I think, in the chat. Yes. So someone was confused about region. So Region 1, it's a very specific definition that pertains to the Louisiana Division of the Arts. So our region is Orleans, Plaquemines, and Jefferson parishes. So basically, anything that you're paying for with this grant needs to happen in that region. Great. Okay, that was the only question in the chat. Yes, Miriam.
Yeah, my question is, do you have any examples of music-related projects that have received this grant?
Yeah, sure. So if you go to our website, let me do this real quick and I'll put a link in the chat. So we have on the grant making page on our website the list of every project that's been funded for the last, I think going back to 2018, we have there. So let me put this here. So on that website, you'll scroll down to the bottom and there's a little drop down for each year that has a list of all the Louisiana Project grantees. Great. Yeah, Elizabeth, I can send out the slides with the follow-up email for this session, if that is helpful. Anybody else?
Oh, I have a question. I have another question. With the fiscal sponsorships, if I'm applying with a fiscal sponsor for other grants, and say those would be for like different amounts, like higher amounts, could I theoretically pay them more than $150 for those, in addition to the $150 that's allowable for your fiscal sponsorship for the other parts of my fiscal sponsorship with them? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, your relationship with that fiscal sponsor outside of this grant is your relationship with them. You can only bill $150 to the grant.
For this grant, I got you. Thank you.
And yes, question. I have two. How often does LPG actually address payment for less than the amount that's requested? Because I think the amount is what, 5,000. So how often does that happen for applicants who apply and they get less than the amount that they applied for?
It happens fairly often. Normally it's like slightly less. I think all of our grants last year were between 3,600 for the most part and 5,000. It's really, so when the panel groups meet, they also decide how they're going to allocate the funds. So they can fund projects at the full amount, or they can decide to spread the money out further and assign slightly lower amounts to more projects. So it will happen that you're funded at a lower amount sometimes, but they're fairly small grants. So the difference there is also fairly small at the end of the day.
Gotcha. And let me, and how, did you mention that there were 80 applicants last time? Well, what is usually the average? Okay, about 80.
Yeah. There were
Gotcha.
80 last time. I think the year before that, there were about 70. It's gone up over the years. We've really received a lot more applications in years past. It kind of dropped off with COVID, but then has been coming back up. So I think I did the math yesterday, and we were able to fund like 36% of applications last year. So it's not a big pot of money for our region. The state breaks it up per capita, and it's on the whole pot for the whole state is $1 million. So we're allocated about $127,000 for this program. So it's just, there's
Gotcha.
small grants with a small pool to pull from.
Okay, gotcha. And then I have one last one. When are there definitive report dates or listed? Because I know you mentioned kind of like a range of when those things would be for the 75% to be allotted initially if awarded, and then the other 25. What are those actually dates?
Yes. So you'll hear in early September if you're awarded, and then your contract is due by October 1st. The contract is really simple. It's just through submittable. You basically put your name, check a box, agree that you'll abide by the grant guidelines. So that only takes, a minute to complete. So that is due October 1st, 2025 if you're awarded. And then the end of the grant period is September 30th, 2026. And your final report is due by October 31st, 2026. If your project is done sooner than that, you can submit your final report sooner. For this year's grants, I sent out the final report like a month ago. That form was available, and some folks have already finished their project and submitted that final report. So you don't have to wait to the end of the period if your project is complete, but those final reports are due for sure by October 31st, 2026.
All right, that's good information. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
I have a question.
What does it mean, media?
Sure. So when you look at the grant guidelines, there's a definition for media. It's like film, video, radio sort of projects. I can pull up that specific definition here. So media projects provide financial assistance to organizations and artists involved in film, video, radio, or related media. Projects should focus on the development of film, video, and radio as art forms where experimentation, technique, and creative processes are included in the project design.
Okay.
I have a question about community access to the project. Does that mean that the access has to be free? Let's just say it's theater and you're putting on a play. Does that mean that can you still sell tickets, or is that prohibited?
You can sell tickets. It's just you couldn't produce something that is only for a closed membership.
Okay. Okay, perfect. And then one other thing, when it comes to an individual applying for this grant, I know you kind of emphasize it has to be beneficial to the community. Does that mean like if I make this something that the community can audition for, or I want to put community members in, like the actors or composing, does that count as benefiting the community, or would it need to be something deeper?
It really if you look at the criteria and sort of say, is my project hitting these points that are in the criteria? So in that, are you engaging populations reflective of the community in the project? Or is there some sort of benefit to the community from the project? So it's really definitely having community involvement in a theater project can hit those marks. Absolutely. But really looking at the criteria and and the questions in the grant proposal will also ask you directly, how was the target audience involved in the planning of this project? So if you start reading those questions and you're like, I don't really have answers to these questions, then it might not be the best fit. But that's a good litmus test if you go and read through the application questions and feel that you have strong answers relative to them.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Great. Anybody else?
Yeah, and I have one last one. If a project would be considered a hybrid project, say from a media and then culinary section, have well, I think I'll probably submit to you and touch bases with you on that.
Yeah,
But my mind was concerning those hybrid projects, possibly that fit more than one criteria.
Yeah, you can be involving multiple art forms. You just have to have it. It's one or more. So some projects will fall neatly into one media section, but a lot of things don't. So you can be addressing multiple artistic media within the same project, definitely.
Okay, thank you.
Great. All right. Well, again, if you have any other questions, reach out to me anytime. I'll be doing those 2 drop-in sessions. I'll put a note about that in my follow-up email. And then, yeah, I'm available if you need me. So I hope everybody has a great rest of your day. And I look forward to seeing your applications. Great. Thanks, y'all.